Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. And as you can see, my FPL team certainly did. I find myself approximately at 150k. This is being recorded before the Newcastle game finishes, so you can imagine there will be some fluctuation in rank, but only a tad given the EO is pretty low in that second half now that ESEX. We'll be taking a deep dive into all of the games and what we learned from them across the weekend and looking at my very extensive Gameweek 5 transfer plans for which I could take so many different routes. If you're new around here, please do consider subscribing. If you've enjoyed the content and haven't so far, which quite a lot of you have from the statistics, please do consider subscribing, and I hope you get something out of this. So let's get into it. This part will certainly be the shorter section of the video because, as I'm sure you already know, who got what points, and you don't need to be told that. So just a very quick glance and just some thoughts on the players just to help you out. If you saw my appearance on Green Arrow, you would know that I was actually very excited owning Sells against a barrage of effective ownership from Liverpool. And for him to walk away with a 9-pointer and for all of the Liverpool assets to blank, well, it couldn't have gone much better. I will touch on him and Forest just in general when I look at the Liverpool versus Forest game, but absolutely delighted with him and delighted with the performance. He'll be staying for a long time. Maybe one thing to note on Sells, though, however, is that against the better teams, when Forest set up in this low block, really compact structure, he will face a lot of low-level XG shots, which I do think could be very good for his save accumulation. So I'm very, very, very happy to own him. And he just looks like he might be the 4.5, the one that we get every year that becomes template pretty quickly, given he has a good defense and a high ceiling. Moving on to the defenders. Now, as a unit, they did fantastically, but they were hugely, hugely carried by Gabriel. I mean, it was something I spoke about in the preview and just generally last week. Spurs' susceptibility to set pieces, Gabriel's aerial threat, and it all came to fruition with Saka providing the assist. So couldn't have asked for more. Absolutely magnificent, and he will be going nowhere. Konsa and Robinson. So Konsa I'll speak about more in the section where I analyze Villa a little bit. Wasn't particularly impressed, and I'll have to keep him now just with the way my team is structured. But I'm not overly excited at the prospect of having to play him week on week on week. Robinson, I mean, Fulham are pretty good defensively, right? So to not walk away with a clean sheet to a 95th minute lapse of concentration, and I thought Leno could have saved it, honestly. Little bit frustrating, but whatever. I'm sure it was for the best because maybe if that didn't happen, all of the rest of this brilliant stuff wouldn't, including the Gabriel goal. But overall, to get, 27 points from 4 defenders, especially when there's only 1 premium in there, magnificent. I'm delighted that my faith in Emil Smith-Rowe paid off. A 7-pointer in this week, honestly, is basically like a haul, especially for him to get the clean sheet point and a bonus point because he was subbed off earlier. Well, it's just magnificent, and he's someone who is in the transfer plan section, but I wouldn't be averse to holding him. I'm very happy with what he's producing, especially at home, and we'll go into more depth on him later. Saka is also someone who is in the transfer plan section as a potential exit for my team, but you know what? Getting 7 points, all things considering, he barely had much of the ball. There weren't really many opportunities for him in the game. Martinelli should have squared one, but apart from that, to walk away with a 7-pointer, again, solid. Funnily enough, Eze and Rodgers probably outperformed Emil Smith-Rowe and Saka in terms of just what you would want from your FPL asset to get as a performance. However, both returned empty-handed. Eze, I thought, had a good chance in the first half where maybe he could have slipped to Mateta or maybe he could have finished it himself. In general, even though Nketiah was playing in a split striker type system, Eze still had a lot of involvement and was in really good areas. So I'm more than happy to keep him, especially with what I've seen on United. I think United certainly have this susceptibility to generate isolated situations for the other team's players, and Eze is probably the best person to profit off that, just given their game model. So I'm more than happy to have Eze for next week. And honestly, I was happy about having him for Leicester, but I might be a bit more bullish against the United fixture. Rodgers we're going to discuss, but he's lacking that killer instinct. So many opportunities to return, that 1v1, that pass to Watkins, just generally the fact that he's so in and about. I do also think his positioning could become a little bit worse with Duran's emergence, which is something we'll touch on. However, at 5 million, he's a decent enabler. I am, however, and whilst I am probably not in a position to relinquish him, I do think that if you are in a slightly luxurious position, I would genuinely think about maybe not this week, give it 1 more week, and then look at taking him out because I wouldn't be so surprised if this run of blanks continues because, like I said, he has appeared to lack a killer instinct. The forwards, well, Havertz didn't really have much of a sniff, couple headers in the first half, but he was really used as someone just to help the team and not so much for FPL. I didn't expect it to be that one-sided towards the defensive side of the game, towards the hold-up, the link-up, the transitional threat. I thought he would get in behind a bit more. I thought people would be feeding him a bit. That wasn't to be the case, and considering Arsenal, my Arsenal assets did fantastically well overall, I'm fine just with that 2-pointer. Haaland, we'll talk about him in a bit more depth when we get to the game reviews, because I don't want to repeat what I'm saying. Brilliant. Just the best asset in the game by a mile at the moment, and he will maybe not be the captain next week, but apart from next week, he is captainable every single fixture after that for the foreseeable future. Isak came off at half-time. Now, I don't know the exact reason, but he is someone who's, again, heavily involved in the transfer plans, and he may very well be seeing the chopping block. So, yeah, like I told you, wanted to keep the team review short because you can read what's on screen, you can see what's on screen. Now, let's get into what we learned. We can delve into the players a little bit more and look at my transfer. Let's just start with Liverpool versus Forest. I watched the entire game, and I've got a lot to say on it. I think there's a lot to be learned. What I would say is there's a lot of text on screen, and I understand that. So if you just want to listen and follow along, by all means, please do. That is just kind of there to remind you of a few things whilst you're listening. I was so impressed by the coaching performance of Nuno Espirito Santo. I think it is one of the best coaching performances we have seen this season. 4-4-2 off the ball. He drops both his wingers. He places central midfielders in their positions. And the reason he does that is because both of them have huge engines. They're very robust in the duel. When Liverpool players find themselves in pockets, they'll be better at closing them down quicker. That's not allowing Liverpool to create chances and leverage their quality in those pockets. Generally, the block was deep. It was compact. He didn't do what many other teams had done and go away to a big side and play in a progressive manner, play in an expansive manner, play with the line slightly higher and try to pin the opposition. He didn't do that at all. And I thought it was a brilliant approach, one that's worked so often in the past that I don't understand why it's being abandoned now. And yeah, from a coaching standpoint, so good. And then he went for the win, right? He knew that the transitional threat of Elanga and Cho was there in general. He brought them on later in the game. He leveraged Morgan Gibbs-White's carrying ability in the first half just to get himself up the pitch if need be. His small space ability as well. Wood up top, who's good at hold up. I mean, he didn't have too many instances where I guess he showcased that, but he was still okay overall. And I just thought Forest overall were brilliant. Now, how does this translate to FPL? Well, I think Wood is similar to Havertz, really has that zonal dominance of that space that occupies the two centre-backs. He's constantly in and around there. Highway Awoniyi really doesn't look to be in favour. Wood's been fantastic under Nuno. And Forest, just as a side, look very good. They create a decent amount of chances. This game is a little bit different, but against other teams, they'll create a decent amount of chances. And I think at that value, he could actually just be set and forget. He really is someone I'm considering just getting in and then maybe placing a bit more money in the midfield because the disparity between the premiums and the rest does appear to be pretty large at the moment. So overall, I have so many good things to say about Forest. If you are a Liverpool asset owner, a multiple Liverpool asset owner, I really wouldn't worry too much. I earmark this as the toughest fixture they would have in their first 5 anyway. This is the only team that's going to go and set up in a deep, compact block. Bournemouth, they probably won't do this, right? They'll go and still press high. Salah will find himself, especially against the backline, in a lot of isolated situations. He won't have to stay as wide, I don't think. I think he'll be allowed to come inside more. And I do think a lot of Liverpool's issues in this game stem from the fact that Trent, after the first 25 minutes, didn't get too involved. Now, when he was involved in the first 25, Liverpool's tempo was good. They looked threatening. But after that, I noticed he dropped deeper, and I didn't really like it. I think the McAllister knock was a big deal because he went centrally, and I do think that when Liverpool are breaking down these type of blocks, it's better to have his crossing capacity in those wider areas because he can just influence the game a little bit more, especially with the diagonals as well, right? Those switches of play are so useful to, I guess, dissettling a block to an extent. And just maybe creating little pockets of space here and there. So overall, I wouldn't look into this too much. I thought Jota was poor. I actually thought the setup was a decent game for him to be the one to really exploit the space, right? You knew it was going to be narrow and compact, so you knew that Salah and Diaz had to maintain their width. But Jota in and around, I thought he could have done a bit more. Now, that is something to think about because if Liverpool are to face this structure more often, not only do you have the expected minutes problems of Nunes off the bench, but maybe he's like, okay, you know what? I want to play Nunes in this game just to stretch the backline a bit more, try and allow Szoboszlai to arrive in almost Jota-like pockets and leverage his ball striking. So that is something I would look out for. I thought we learned a lot about Forest, about how good they were. About Liverpool, not too much. I do genuinely just think that this was just a tough matchup for them, and they'll be back to firing in Game Week 5, and I would really like to have a triple up for that. Right, now the Arsenal game was really interesting. I thought not having Declan Rice was a huge deal. I think you could see that in the first half. There were a lot of moments where Arsenal usually would be able to transition on the opposition. However, they just didn't have the legs in midfield with Partey and Jorginho. Trossard can't do everything, right? Sure, you can even get like Havertz dropping in a little bit, but he can't come so short to receive the ball. Unless they've got no presence up top. It was difficult to release Martinelli and Saka just in general in behind, because Spurs did a pretty good job of shielding themselves from that and just their press in midfield. So overall, considering there was no Declan Rice, I think defensively, pretty good. Spurs didn't really have a big opportunity in the game, pretty much, right? Arsenal limited them to that very well. I thought Gabriel and Saliba in particular, wow. Every duel won. Physically, they handle Solanke well, I thought. We'll come on to him. No mistakes, always in the right position, always picking up the ball in those second bounces. They were just utterly, utterly brilliant, right? And the thing with that is, now I think about Erling Haaland against them, and after seeing that performance, especially knowing that Declan Rice will be back, physically, I do genuinely think they might be able to cope with Erling Haaland again. Now, he does look better this year in terms of his body, fitter, leaner, stronger, quicker. But still, I expect Saliba and Gabriel, especially given it's two of them, and Haaland will find himself isolated at times. He almost does in every game, right? I do think that maybe they could do a job on him yet again. And all of a sudden, my projections for Haaland and my bullishness on him next week has certainly declined, given how good of a performance this was. I will touch on Solanke quickly, because I guess he's the reference point. I was impressed at his level of physicality. I probably didn't realize he was that strong or that well built, that good of a condition, even at Bournemouth. So that was definitely a positive to know. And when he plays centre-backs who are not Gabriel and Saliba, who physically aren't quite at that level, which is pretty much everyone, I think he could profit from that, really. I really do think that could be an avenue to points for him and just goals in general, leveraging that quality of his. However, in terms of the footballing side of things, in those small spaces, being in the right positions to generate chances. Now, I know he didn't get much, but I don't think he gave much as well to his side in being able to supply him. And I just wonder, could that be a little bit of a problem down the line? He was okay against Leicester, but even there, I noticed a few things that I didn't like. I'm still quite a big advocate of Son at 9. I think still a brilliant, brilliant player. Really good at so many fundamental things that you need at number 9. I really don't like him at left wing. So if he is to persist as a left winger, which I imagine he does, given they've just spent 60-ish on Solanke, I wouldn't get him as an option. I wouldn't have him as an option. I wouldn't be buying him, because I just, at that price, you need more. This season, you just need more. Porro, however, I really like. I thought Spurs were good defensively against a side that do pose a lot of transitional threat. A lot of sides will probably approach the game against Spurs like that, let them have a ball and try and transition on them, counter-attack on them. But they looked pretty secure. Not much went through the centre, whereas West Ham, that's something that's happened to them in the past few weeks. Van de Ven's recovery pace is a magnificent tool to offsetting those dangerous transitions. Same with Udogie. So I do think Porro's clean sheet likelihood compared to the rest of the field has gone up this year as more teams start to play in an expansive manner. And obviously, such a high volume of shots, a lot of attacking actions in good spaces. So I do genuinely just expect him to be one of the better options. Havertz and Saka, even though they didn't really do much, they were still the ones always in the right positions. I think, especially from Gameweek 6, you can expect them to do well. Now, I think the game against City might be a little bit more cagey, but City's defense have always been a little bit susceptible to a bit of quality or a mistake, so I wouldn't be surprised if one of these two do. Now, for those of you who watched my wildcard video, you would have known that I earmarked Jared Bowen as a potential transfer in for teams down the line, but also for myself down the line. And it was just like those type of snappy, sharp actions are always going to lead to output at some point, because that type of quality can't be stopped over an entire season. And it's just reasons like that I just like him as an option. So he's definitely someone I'm keeping an eye on. I'm still happy with Smith Rowe. I thought, again, like similar to Eze, they're just occupying really good spaces. That will inevitably always lead to points when you have a player of that quality. So I'm pretty happy to keep him if I have to do so. I do think that he'll be better at home when Fulham have more of the ball, because his volume of chances in general is quite low. But again, I'm hoping that his quality offsets that, and that when he's at home and I can play him, I can at least get returns on a fairly regular basis. On away games, maybe I look at bringing an 8th attacker to kind of just allow myself to bench him. But at home, at least, I'm happy with him, more than happy with him at 5.5. I mean, 22 points, starting at 5.5 in 4 games, averaging 5.5. Top value. I mean, just look at the defenders who who are at a similar price, right? They don't even come close, most of them. The Everton versus Villa game, again, another one where I thought we learned a lot. DCL looks great. He looks really fit and sharp. I thought he did a fantastic job of making the centre-backs' lives very difficult. And this is the second game in a row I haven't been impressed with their physical dominance of the game. I don't think they're imposing themselves enough. And if that's just an issue for them, especially in today's era, where a lot of the trend is kind of just trending towards athleticism and being brilliant athletes, I do think that some forwards will get the best of them, and that makes me worry about Villa's clean sheet potential. Hence why I spoke about I'm not too excited at having Konsa week in, week out now. McNeil also looked good. I think Everton will just score goals and concede goals, to be honest. I think every game is going to end up somewhere in the range of like 2-2-ish. Their game against Leicester, I can definitely see Vardy scoring, but I can also definitely see DCL scoring. And I do think that he just might be an option. The fixture run is so good that we'll touch on him in the transfer plan section, but I do think he could really become an option. In terms of Villa's attack, what I think might happen is Watkins and Rodgers play up top, and Rodgers plays on the left in their 4-2-2. That would mean that his output likelihood declines even more than it already is, because he's lacking that killer instinct, right? Like, he's had so many situations where he could have returned, but he hasn't done so. And I'm just wondering, is that even going to go up? Because it's not the easiest thing to develop this type of killer instinct, right? And there's not a lot of players who start at a certain level when it comes to finishing an output and then massively improve. It's actually quite a rare occurrence, because it is one of those things where you kind of have it or not. So with that in mind, I'm definitely keeping a very, very close eye on him. I'm hoping that the volume of chances he gets and the volume of situations he's in offsets that, quite literally the opposite to Smith Rowe. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the chopping block pretty soon. And the reason I think Duran's a problem for him is because I play on the left side of the 4-2-2. Watkins was just always there in the right positions, running the channels, running behind, getting the ball, being the focal point, especially given that Rodgers isn't a prolific goal scorer yet. When Duran doesn't start, I think a lot of it will just be almost magnetized towards Watkins. So as an option with his fixtures, just going to be super, super solid, I think. I don't think we learned too many new things from Manchester City versus Brentford. We already knew that Thomas Frank was a good manager. We already knew their press was pretty good. I spoke about how impressed I was with their transitional capabilities as a team, specifically with Visson and Mbeumo against Palace, and that's just something I expect a continuation of. We also saw City concede a pretty ridiculous early goal. Nothing new there as well for owners of Guardiola. Well, I guess he got bench or Rico Lewis or Edison. What we did learn, however, I thought, was that it's not always going to be Rico Lewis being the one who's in the pocket. Some games he gets rotated, and then it'll be Guardiola who actually goes up. And I think when that happens and Walker plays right back, given that run from Game Week 7, I think he could be a magnificent option. So that is something to keep an eye on and plan for. One thing I didn't expect from Haaland was his finishing range to increase by this much. I mean, the type of goals he's scoring, they're not easy. He's making them look easy. And they've been such a wide range of finishes, right? You've got the chip against Brentford. You've got the one that he smashed across Flecken with his right foot. You've got the one against West Ham where he leant back a bit and smashed it over Areola and just under the bar. So many different types of goals. And as a result, I think he can honestly maintain this brace a game thing. I know a lot of people say it's unsustainable. I do think we're dealing with something we've never seen before. So I will be disappointed if I don't get a brace out of him every single game. Arsenal's different, but other than that, I expect a brace every single game from him for the foreseeable future. Eze, I thought still was pretty solid. Like, the positions I like that he took up. I know the quality I'm getting. I know the volume of shots. Very good on the BPS in terms of his baseline. That was something I was actually monitoring during the game. He'll get points. I like the Man United fixture as well for the reasons I discussed in the review, right? So he's an easy hold at 6.9 when there's so many opportunities elsewhere and need for transfers. Still don't like Palace's defense. Same reasons as last time. That should spell good. My apologies. Yeah, I'm not a fan for all of the reasons that I previously mentioned that I'm not going to go into again. Leicester, like I said, I really like their attack compared to, I guess, average perspective on it. Vardy still looks pretty sharp. Mavidi is a good player. So again, just to reinforce it, I do not think that when you play them for your defenders, this is a guaranteed clean sheet. I do think that this is a game that will be slightly tough, and I don't expect many teams to keep. I actually quite like Jamie Vardy as an option. He's not in the transfer plan section, but forget Arsenal in Game Week 6. That aside, the fixture run is brilliant. He looks sharp. He has penalties. He's cheap. He is really the talisman for that team. I honestly don't think it's a bad option. United versus Southampton, again, is a game I don't think we learned too much from. I think we already knew that United certainly have problems with their attack. I'm not a fan of the build-up structure. I'm not a fan of the game model. I think it has too much of a reliance in Kobe in the middle. Bruno isn't receiving the ball in the right areas, and I just think he's so poorly platformed for FPL that at his price, I really would be looking at getting rid of soon. I think you got 5 points against Southampton. You had to keep him for that. But sides, I just get rid. Southampton really do look like the team to target for me. I think being insistent on playing in this style without the ball playing centre backs is going to be tough for them. I think really they should take a leaf out of Nuno's book, and I mean that with the greatest respect, because I know the manager obviously knows far, far, far more than me about football. I just think it'd be wise, and that is just my opinion. Yeah, I just think they're going to concede goals, to be honest. Similar to last week, you saw what happened against Brentford, and I would just say they're the team to target. In terms of the Brighton Ipswich game, that was interesting. I thought, again, we saw on display the good coaching from Brighton, their attacking quality just in general. Finishing still will always be and is one of the hardest parts of the game, and again, they didn't really display that particularly well. And as a result, it's why I only like João Pedro at the Brighton assets now. I think actually when I was doing my wildcard video, I shouldn't have included Minter in that. So I do genuinely apologize for that, because on reflection, even before the game, I was like, the expected minutes aren't great, and I'm just worried about their output, because whilst Minter's got good ball striking and he can find himself in good positions, Matoma, him, Welbeck, they're never players who have gone on this ridiculous run for a sustained period. Whereas João Pedro, from what I see, his finishing just in general, his now is just to be in the right position at the right time. I think it's a lot safer just to go with him, especially with his minutes and penalties. So personally, I would just be going there and just fading the rest. But I do expect them to make chances. And then Ipswich, well, I was impressed by Hutchinson again in terms of his transitional threat. He showcased it to me against Liverpool, showcased it again in one particular carry against Brighton. I think it was off of a corner, but just in general, he's pretty decent. And Delap as well. Delap's quick, and he's just a good carrier. So I do think that Ipswich will score goals against certain sides when they set up in this fashion. And the reason they'll set up in this fashion is because I think McKenna has a good idea of where his team's at, and he knows that he can't just play in a super, or just the same way that a lot of other teams are playing, right? That I've talked about so much. So overall, I'm still very impressed by McKenna. I like his humility, and I like the fact that he's flexible where so many aren't. Muric, we kind of already knew was good from last season, but he had a good game. And I just think Ipswich will be similar to Leicester in the sense that they'll score goals and they'll also be a little bit difficult to beat at times. Yeah, not necessarily one to target. I would say Southampton's one. I would say when you get a United side that are going to employ the same game model against Liverpool, that's the type of team to target. I would say when Bournemouth go away to sides at big pitches and press really high, that's the type of team to target. Not so much Leicester and Ipswich for the huge horse necessarily. Right, like I said, this is being recorded during the Wolves Newcastle game, so take this with a pinch of salt. I do think that is something I spoke about last week, that I think that Tonali's inclusion in the side will be good for Isak. We obviously didn't get to see him on the pitch at the same time, but still, I'm not in love with their midfield and the lack of creativity. I think he should just be being found more in the game. I think Gordon's got a lot of responsibility, given they didn't recruit particularly well in terms of the attacking side. So does that affect his FPL output? Yeah, honestly, I think it does. And for me, I'm kind of just looking at fading Newcastle now, given the difficulty of the upcoming fixtures. Wolves, I'm going to buy Cunha at some point. I think they're just the type of side that will perform really well in FPL when they get the fixtures to do so. They have a horrible run to start with, but eventually Aït-Nouri, Cunha, I think will all become options. So just something to plan for. Don't discount them because they've had a bad set of fixtures so far. Bournemouth, again, similar to last week, I think very tough place to go. They're pressed on that pitch with the quality of coaching, very difficult. They'll generate chances as a result of that, not to mention their quality. Semenyo looked good. I would prefer if he had more so of an overlapping fullback so he could drift inside a bit more in somewhat of an asymmetric system. A little bit like Pep's last year for Foden, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think we'll just have to make do with decent returns throughout the season. I don't necessarily see him being super explosive, though, just because I think that there will be a certain spread of output at Bournemouth. I'm looking just in general to fade Chelsea assets, apart from Sanchez, who I thought was a decent option for wildcard. Because, well, with Jackson, I just think you want 90 minutes out of your forwards. I really do. And I think Nkunku could take minutes at 9. And not only that, he's just not going to haul for you super often because of the fact that he's not clinical. So yeah, I don't like Jackson as an option. Palmer, I think, becomes an option when he plays at the top of the box, as we saw against Wolves. But if he is to play on the right and Madueke is to get dropped, then I think it's a little bit of an issue. I do think it will continue to see him at the top of the box, and the change in personnel to allow João Felix to come into the team was just a result of a very poor performance from the boys overall. But I think he should be okay. And I would say it's a risk because of how much you're paying, but there is at least upside to that. Finally, for those of you who are invested in my team or have very similar teams, Game Week 5 transfer plans. And just in general, even if you don't, I can definitely take some. I hadn't thought of the Saka to Salah move at all until I saw Saka limping off. Now, he probably isn't injured, right? Probably fine. And he probably will play against City. Most definitely. But it's a really nice route to Salah. A brilliant way to capture some upside for my team. I think he barely got the ball against Spurs. So what's going to happen against City? You know what? City probably opened themselves up to being transitioned on a little bit more as well, just because they'll have more of the ball. And I think Pep isn't of the same mold of Arteta. He doesn't seek the same defensive dominance all across the pitch that Arteta does. So I think there'll be opportunities for that. I do, however, think there will be a small quantity of opportunity. And can I really rely on Arsenal, not so much him, but Arsenal to always put him in the right positions? No, I don't think so. Not with the way the midfield currently is and the fact that Odegaard probably won't be there. And as a result, I really am considering this just 1 week, just for 1 week, and then getting... I don't have to get Saka back in Game Week 6, right? I can get him back in Game Week 7. Having Mohamed Salah away to Wolves, I believe, it really isn't the end of the world. And I've still got a bunch of cash left over. If I wanted to, sell Isak for his fixture against Manchester, as an example. So that's something I'm considering. The second would be to keep Saka, so I have him there for Game Week 6. Get rid of Isak, which is something I'd really like to do, and then go Salah and DCL. DCL, I love the fixtures. I love what I've seen from him. It'll give me an opportunity to captain Salah. The only thing is for a hit, but given I've had a good start, I think this 4-point hit might be a very, very good investment. I've obviously spoken about DCL before. I think this could be a really good game for Salah because of the isolated situations he'll find himself in, because he won't be shipped too wide all the time because the block won't be too compact. The midfield doesn't really set up in that. You see Bournemouth at times get caught with very little space between their back and midfield line, and I think that's actually not a good thing when you're looking to defend, mainly so because they can see transitions aplenty. You'll probably get the feeling that I really do just want Salah. I think there's so much upside to be had in him next week. The route to him isn't particularly difficult. I would quite like to offload Isak. The middle one is probably what I'm leaning to. My original plan was to go Hall to Porro. The defense is pretty awful next week, right? Because I have Robinson playing Isak, but if I sell him, then it's not that big of an issue. Konsa's fine, and then Gabriel obviously is away at City, but I could get another bullet header from him. So this is what I was considering. But if I am to sell Isak, I then still open myself to the upside of Robinson. And I'm probably becoming a little bit less bullish on the move because I'm so adamant, I want to get rid of Isak. I think I'll make the second move just for those looking at price rises and just want to go early. I wouldn't recommend doing so. You've got the Champions League coming up. You've got EFL Cup. Just wait. Let's see how it develops. But as of now, Salah and Dominic Calvert-Lewin as a pairing is what I'm looking at. Calvert-Lewin, set and forget for ages. Also very cheap. Salah, even if he's there for 1 week, right? Get him out in 6 and get the funds straight back. But too much upside, I think, in that game week when I really don't like the captaincy options anymore. I'm not as bullish as Haaland as I was previously. I like Eze as an option, but I think it's a huge, huge risk. I'm not sure I really want to open myself up to that. So I do think it'll be the middling option. And that is all she wrote for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. I hope you learned something from it and got some value from it. As you can see, flying start. I'm delighted with it. I hope you have had an equally good week. I shall see you very soon for the next one. And again, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. Comment. I love speaking to you guys in the comments. I love the comment section on YouTube in particular. I feel like it's so insightful. There's a lot of genuine discussion about strategy and intelligent discussion. So I love it. So please do comment. I'd love to hear all about what you're doing, your questions, and I shall see you very soon. Make sure to enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.